Поговорим об этом прямо сейчас.
Joining us now is Ben Hodges, former Commanding General, United States Army Europe. Welcome.
Hello, Ekaterina.
It's great to see you, General Hodges. The Washington Post reported that by White House standards, the decision was made quickly. Why do you think this is, and do you think this relaxation of restrictions on Ukraine is connected with the situation's escalation in the Kharkiv direction?
I think, first of all, this is good news, obviously, that there has been a lessening of restrictions, but I think it's terrible policy still. It was a terrible policy to begin with. And the fact that there is or was this restriction is a reflection of the inability or the unwillingness of the administration to say that they want Ukraine to actually win. And the same is true for Germany. If the strategic objective was that Ukraine defeats Russia, which is what I think it should be, then the administration would say, everything you have, use as you see fit, as long as it is in compliance with international law. So I think while the new policy is better, it still has a major problem in that it is restricted to the Kharkiv area, and also it does not allow the use of the ATACMS 300-kilometer range weapon. I think this is a mistake.
Скажите, пожалуйста, что если такое разрешение будет получено?
Can you tell us what happens if such a decision is made? I'll definitely ask a separate question as to why these restrictions continue to exist and how, as far as I understand, Joseph Biden's stubbornness continues to play a key role in them existing. If strikes with long-range rockets on Russian territory are permitted, many fear that this will lead to more escalation or a third world war. Why do you think this would be a good idea, and what would it change on the front line?
Well, first of all, I do not think it's likely that Russia would actually use a nuclear weapon in this scenario, because there's no benefit for Russia to use a nuclear weapon. They can already destroy cities with their weapons they're using now. If they use a nuclear weapon, that will cause the United States to have to respond with devastating consequences. That's what my president said. It would also cause a problem for the Kremlin with China, because the Chinese have told Russia that they should not use a nuclear weapon. So in my view, the Kremlin's only benefit with nuclear weapons comes when they don't actually use them. They only threaten, because they see that we do things like restrict Ukraine's ability to use ATACMS where they need to be used, or other bad decisions like Germany not agreeing to provide Taurus. All of these things are connected. So we have excessive fear that Russia might escalate, and I don't believe they will. Of course, Russia has thousands of nuclear weapons, and of course, they do not care how many innocent people they kill, even their own. But I think from a practical standpoint, they know that there is no benefit for them to actually use a nuclear weapon. But that's the reason that my president still does not agree to allow Ukraine to use ATACMS wherever they want.
Но все-таки я вернусь.
I'll return to my question of what the use of long-range rockets and strikes on military objects on Russian territory will change if such permission is given. If, for example, permission is given to use ATACMS with a range of 300 kilometers or Storm Shadow with a range of 560 kilometers, as far as I remember, and I'm not a military expert like you, my apologies if I say something incorrectly, what would this change and what objects would the Ukrainians strike?
Эксперт, в отличие от вас.
Well, you're correct that the Storm Shadow could be used further out, just like the Taurus could be used further out. The advantage of having these long-range precision weapons is that they can destroy headquarters, artillery, air defense, logistics, and airfields from which these attacks against Kharkiv, for example, or other cities are originating. So the way you defeat Russia's only advantage, which is mass, their large numbers of troops, the way you defeat that is by destroying those things that are required for the mass to be effective: headquarters, artillery, air defense, logistics. That's what you can do with precision. So when Ukraine identifies logistic sites on the other side of the border that are necessary to help Russian troops that are fighting inside Ukraine, if you hit those, obviously, it dramatically reduces the ability of Russian forces. Same thing with headquarters, especially when you consider how much of the Russian ground force is not properly trained. If you destroy the headquarters, then they become even less effective.
I want to clarify, as you and I have spoken countless times on TV Rain's broadcast, that Kiev's main target may become Crimea and all the military objects that are situated on Crimean territory, as we have also spoken about how cutting off Crimea from Russia would be in Ukraine's interests. Now we're speaking about Russian territory, so everyone's interested. Where could these long-range rockets land? Would it be Rostov, Belgorod, Moscow? What places are we talking about?
Всем интересно.
Well, it's wherever the Ukrainian General Staff finds headquarters or the logistics or the radar, for example, things that help Ukraine's forces. Now, look, of course, there are many, many targets inside Russian-occupied Ukraine, but also across the border. And I trust the General Staff, and I trust General Budanov and to make the right choices where they should hit, what will give the biggest benefit, and also when, the timing, when should that happen? These are all going to be factors that the right people in the planning staffs will consider when they hit particular targets.
Господин Ходжес, последнее, о чем я...
Mr. Hodges, the last thing I'd like to ask about is the situation in the Kharkiv direction. How do you evaluate the risk to Kharkiv and the current situation on the battlefield?
На данный момент.
Well, of course, if you are a civilian that lives in the city of Kharkiv or the surrounding area, it's quite dangerous because Russia is using multi-million-dollar cruise missiles as well as drones and artillery and rockets just to hit civilian targets. I mean, without real discrimination. So, and these glide bombs that are not precision weapons. So, of course, it's dangerous if you're a civilian inside the city. And until Ukraine has enough air defense to protect the entire city. But my sense is that Russia probably does not have the capability to capture Kharkiv. It does not have the ability to overwhelm the defenders of Kharkiv. I think that they actually, from what I understand, that the power of their attacks is decreasing each time because they just don't have quality troops. They don't have the real military capability to create a breakthrough of some sort. So I think as the ammunition situation gets better for the defenders of Kharkiv, the threat will diminish even more.
Ну, то есть...
So, according to your prognosis, we shouldn't expect any major changes on the front line anytime soon, to briefly ask.
Если коротко.
No.
Нет.
No.
Thank you very much, and hopefully until next time on TV Rain, Ben Hodges, former Commanding General, United States Army Europe, with whom we spoke about the situation in Ukraine.